Your thought for the break. And now we're going to have the panel on online registration and online voter education. And I want to thank Jenny Flanagan from Common Cause National for moderating, and also for all of the help that she and Marilyn Carpintero and Susanna Goodman from National helped the Common Cause New York staff putting this convening together. So thank them, please. And turn it over to Jenny.
Thanks, Susan, and thanks everybody for a terrific morning so far. It's I started working in the elections and administration field as an advocate in 2002 from the voters' perspective, but learned very quickly that we cannot advocate for voters in our democracy if we're not working hand in hand with the election officials and administrators who are running our elections. It really is a partnership, and that's one of just the exciting moments of the discussion so far this morning. And that's one of the themes that we want to address in this panel right now, is looking at how we pair up and marry the urgency, I think, from the advocates and those of us in government who are wanting to see greater participation of the electorate with the technology opportunities and how those are really coming together. So we're going to jump right in our conversation, hoping to pick up on some of the themes this morning. And I want to start with Esther Fuchs, who is one of our co-hosts here today. Thank you very much. She is a professor of public affairs and the director of social policy, the social policy program here where we sit here at Columbia University. And she also directs the project who'sontheballot.org. And this is a website designed to improve and engage electors. And we're going to hear more about that. So without further ado.
Thank you. And thank you for allowing me to host this, I think, important convening and to participate on this panel. I'm going to start by talking about the reasons we developed this website, which is a tool, and I emphasize the fact that it is a tool called who'sontheballot.org, and also the mission of what we were intending to accomplish and who our partners have been. The mission of the website is very simple: to positively affect voter participation by providing citizens with easy and convenient access. Emphasize easy, emphasize convenient, add simple, whatever adjective that you use that makes this something that is just simply not difficult. So it's access to information about elections and candidates in New York City and in a centralized location. And we decided to do this website for a variety of reasons, but the first problem was a very basic one: voter turnout. And this is New York City data, so all of you from other places can feel better because we are so pathetic here, it is almost beyond speakable. In the 2008 presidential election, we had a 63.5% turnout. This is of registered voters, not eligible voters. In the mayoral race in 2009, we had a 28.2% turnout. That was very low for a mayoral election, but nevertheless unbelievable. The gubernatorial election, 33.49%. Judicial elections, which the public has no clue about, 5%. And of course, the last presidential election in 2012, 58%. So this problem is a nationwide problem. It's especially difficult in cities. While I'm going after my own city, Los Angeles is here. You guys don't do too much better. 15.6% registered voters turned out in the 2009 mayoral election in Texas. Houston's its largest city, most recent mayoral election, 19.2%. So we could go on and on about the problem. We're not here to simply discuss a problem, but to find solutions to that problem. So Who's on the Ballot was developed in response to this low turnout data, and also to the difficulty many New Yorkers seem to be experiencing finding information about candidates and elections and how to register, but also particularly what you do after you register. And for those of us who care about voter participation, which is everybody in this room, I know, it's important to keep in mind that registration is the first step. When you are a government agency and focus on registration, that's what you're mandated to focus on unless you have a broader scope, which is often not the case. But the group that is least likely to turn out to vote are the newly registered voters. So part of what needs to continue is a voter education and making it easy for individuals to vote on Election Day. And just very quickly, the research shows that turnout can be increased by making it easier for citizens to access information about elections. So in our environment in which people feel bombarded and overwhelmed with too much information often, it's part of the problem is there's not enough information for certain kinds of things, and the accessibility is quite difficult. We also know that states which mail out voter guides or sample ballots and provide this information have a higher turnout than states that do not. And we also know from research the more informed citizens are, the more likely they vote. So there is a direct link between citizen information and voting, and I know many of you work in this field, and so I hope you understand this is just for the purposes of making this linkage that we all sometimes just take for granted. The new, and it's not so new anymore, added piece to this puzzle, of course, is social media and online networks, which have been found in some recent research to be significantly more effective to mobilize people through sharing of information. Online social networks can be leveraged to influence people to vote. And of course, those are the people who are connected through social networks. So we have an added challenge in terms of what we try to do with who's on the ballot, which is not just to link through technology, but also to link through our partner organizations. So we developed an online portal that excuse me, provides New York City citizens information about candidates, ballot referenda, their voter registration status, the location of their polling place, and access to a sample ballot, as well as access to the current online registration through our state's Motor Vehicle Bureau, as well as access to the New York State Board of Elections site for getting a paper form that you have to fill out by hand. Just want everybody to know where we are in New York, nowhere, and that you have to mail back to the State Board of Election. At least you can print it out from a computer now. We are a 501c3 operating under Columbia's umbrella, and we made a special effort to partner with a huge variety of organizations that we felt were working in this space effectively, but also had access to large numbers of member organizations. And so we included good government organizations, of course, community-based organizations, government, as well as the business community. And just as some examples, we're partnering with Common Cause, of course, and with the Hispanic Federation, with Citizens Union. We're also partnering with several New York City agencies who have a mandate for voter information, which is the Campaign Finance Board, as well as the New York City Department of Youth and Community Development, which has a mandate for voter education, and the Partnership for New York City. And there's a whole series more which you can see, and of course the Board of Elections of the City of New York and their Deputy Director, Dawn Sandow. We're so dysfunctional here that we can't even appoint a director. The woman who is running our board valiantly and amazingly is a deputy director. That has to do with partisan politics, apparently, something we're not allowed to talk about. So let me tell you a little bit about the website quickly before I bring it up just so you can see how it works. The core functionality for the people who are interested in the technology, which we expect to share with anybody who wants it, is optimized for mobile devices. It stores no personal information. This was really important. It provides detailed polling information, and it links to candidates' information, which is a very important piece of the puzzle here for all elections. So we link directly to the candidate websites and to the Campaign Finance Board information, to all forms of nonpartisan information, and we're very careful about not providing, as I said, links to organizations which are supporting particular candidates. Just quickly to recap the 2012, and I know I don't have much time, but we worked with the Board of Elections during Hurricane Sandy to make sure all who had access to our website, and we tried very hard to get that information out there, would know where to vote, and I think this was sort of an important success. We translated the website into 3 languages, so it's English, Spanish, and Chinese, and that's been very important in New York, and I know in some of your cities as well. We developed a lot of outreach material, so I want to jump right to some of that outreach material so that you can see that. Just to recap on our visitors, our first time out was the primary and then the general election. For the general election, we had 20,000 visits, and we had, most of it was, 75% was access the site through a computer, 25% through a mobile device. I want to emphasize that we're optimized for mobile viewing, so that's, I guess, an app-like thing. We didn't call it an app formally, because I guess it's not formally an app, but it functions as an app. 24% of our viewers were referred to through social media outlets like Facebook and Twitter. Quickly, just to look at some of the outreach material, and then I'm going to pop to the website. Chris, if you could come up and just get the website up there. Great. Just get up. Just bring up the website. Thanks. So we have. Could you just go fast forward here while he's doing that? I just want to show some of the outreach material. Okay, we can do it while you're online. We worked with some amazing organizations, and including the New York City Office of Media Affairs, and we were able to get part of our outreach campaign included, if you can just go back to that for a second, included the Pilobolus dancers. And so if you can look at this, it says vote. We're happy to share this with anybody. We're in the process of now figuring out how to share what we did. We're doing a roadmap, essentially. We have basically the technology we believe anybody can use, and we want to give it away. It's, of course, you have to get your boards of elections to cooperate with you to make sure you can do the GIS, use the GIS in the back end of this. Just go to the last, the slide before this. Yeah. We also made palm cards and little cards, which are outside if you'd like to see it. So particularly for elderly voters and immigrant voters, so they can actually go to the site, prepare before, and write it in, and then have that with them when they go to vote. So just to make it easy for them. And now if I can go to the site quickly, and I'll just take one more minute, just so you can see. I was like super excited about this. Just roll up, I'm sorry. So basically, it's a very simple, clean website. And this was intentional because, as I said, there's a lot of good information out there. It's just hard for most people to access the information. So you really start with, you can go to the register to vote part. You don't have to click on that, Chris. Just, I'm going to show them. And that will give you access to click through to register to vote. But we also have, find out if you're registered. We tested this in a number of places because a lot of people think they're registered, but they're not, so you can do that right away. And we also are keeping up now with election news, so we're informing everybody about the candidate debates and forums that are out there. basically before the election. So it's all very, very simple and straightforward, the useful links and recent news on mayoral forums, and our wonderful slideshow from the Palabalis dancers about votes. So all you have to do is click in, put in your address. And so if Chris puts in my address, 420 Riverside Drive, and here we have to choose our borough, Manhattan. And what this does is personalize and see my ballot.
I already have it loaded.
And there we are. And so it will tell me, like, who's on my ballot, my personal ballot, not somebody else's ballot, but the candidates running in my district at every level. So it goes from the bottom, which is the city and judicial races, the council races, to the citywide races and the statewide races. And all these links, you can click through to the candidates' own websites and read more about it, or you can click into some of the nonpartisan websites that we're also putting up here. It's very straightforward, it's very simple. And I'll just end with one point. We worked very hard to put together an advisory board to collaborate with others because we think the technology is not that difficult. Where's Chris? Chris is my partner here who was really responsible for making sure this technology is clean and also for making sure that we had information up during Hurricane Sandy for all good things, and for the rest of the good things, Kevin Gully is responsible, excuse me. But the simplicity of this, we feel, makes it very strong. And what we're trying to do now is work with this whole range of partners, which I think has to be tailored to state and local level jurisdictions, as some people talked about in the last session, because this is a tool, and how to get the information out there that this tool even exists is not that easy. So, part of why we got into this space and wanted to do this was also to work with the range of organizations that are involved at the community level to do that outreach, to make sure people know about it and make it available. So as much as I'm enamored with the technology and I feel strongly that this is simple and important, I want to emphasize one thing, which is we're not going to have success in this space without partnering with each other and without working at the grassroots to make sure that the public knows about the work that's being done and the things that we're doing to increase voter turnout. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Thanks so much. I think one of the pieces that really stuck with me from learning about that is your phrase in the beginning, easy, convenient, and simple. And I think that's been one of the themes throughout this day so far from everyone's perspective. If we're going to get and keep people engaged, it's got to be user-friendly and usable. Keeping in the theme of technology, I want to move on to our next speaker, Art Chang, who is currently the chairman of the Voter Assistance Advisory Committee of the New York City Campaign Finance Board. So I'm really excited to sort of hear the perspective from the city government and how you all are looking at voter engagement tools and getting along this theme of keeping people engaged, because why run an election if we don't have any voters participating?
Great. Well, thank you very much, and I want to thank Susan Lerner and Common Cause for having me here. I see so many of our friends and supporters who we've had give us great input along the way, so it's nice to be here. I also wanted to say a huge thank you and a note of recognition to Esther Fuchs and the Who's on My Ballot team. It's been, they have created really sort of forged the groundwork for a set of initiatives that really attempts to do the right things when it comes to elections. And I think the work that Lester has done has been an inspiration to some of the work that we've done at the Campaign Finance Board. Before I begin, I just want to kind of make a quick note of kind of the vantage point that I speak from. I have spent the past 12 years as a technologist in the private sector world. And prior to that, 12 years actually building real things, including in government. I have the dubious distinction of actually having worked in relatively low-level positions in the administrations of Dinkins, Giuliani, Cuomo, and Pataki. And so I'm very familiar with sort of the workings of government and how the character of leadership actually affects what happens on the ground for government administrators, which I think is pretty important. Now, on the technology front, since 2001, I've been either an investor, an advisor, co-founder, or CEO of roughly one technology startup a year. Almost all of them have been focused on enterprise, ranging from real estate finance to child welfare to aviation. And so the sort of the architectures that are required to build really robust, scalable technologies, along with their security and other issues, have been at the forefront. And over the past few years, we've really seen this massive disruption in the enterprise as social media and user-oriented, especially mobile technologies, have actually become not just silos within technology, but actually have to be taken into account in everything that we do. So it's with that perspective that I came to my position at the Voter Assistance Advisory Committee, and I'm also on the board of the New York City Campaign Finance Board, which oversees the city's campaign system. So what we try to do is take the same questions that Esther has been asking, and we ask ourselves, well, what can we do from our unique vantage point, where we are, in essence, and by the way, how many people here know what an API is? Okay, it stands for Application Protocol Interface, and what it means is essentially, very simply, that it's a technical way for one software system to speak to another. And what I like to say is that in my role at the Campaign Finance Board, I get the privilege of being a human API between people and their elected representation. And because of the role of the Campaign Finance Board in overseeing the campaign finance system, we actually have very, very deep insight into those who seek to be elected, and a very, very powerful place to stand in connecting people with those elected representation. And we ask ourselves a different question as well, so about the role of technology in government. I think there is so much good work that happens among everybody in this room to register people, to bring out the vote, to assess candidates, to help during the election cycle, and then to follow up afterwards. But as we've seen over the past decade or so, that the scale that traditional measures can bring in attracting people, especially when they're competing for time with things like Facebook and Twitter and other forms of media entertainment, is considerable. And so, there are many causes for I think the low turnout in these elections. And so Esther asked the right questions. How do we make it convenient? How do we make it as convenient as Amazon? How do we actually bring all the different fragmented pieces together that really make up the whole process of voter engagement and bring them together in one very convenient place? And then she also began to ask another interesting question, which is, how do we set up an account for democracy? Right, my account for democracy is represented by my voter registration. That's my membership ticket to democracy. And then you have the chance to vote. You have a chance to actually express your view. So we took this whole perspective and said, well, if you were to sort of switch the lens and say, if I'm wearing my hat as a software entrepreneur, what can I do to really change the dynamics? How do I change the scale of the game? Instead of it being in the tens of thousands or the hundreds of thousands, how do we actually make change or make the awareness of the possibility of change happen in the millions of people, which everyone from Facebook to LinkedIn to Twitter does. So why can't we do that as well? And so we constructed a campaign based on technology and around marketing using social media and a coalition of private and public partners to construct something that is actually very similar to what Esther has done, but has the feel of what we believe folks who are in the trenches in social media and technology are actually looking for. So let me tell you a little about what we're doing. Let's see. All right. I'm just going to look at it on my own screen so I don't have to turn my back. So we started actually the technology part of this 45 days ago. We've pulled together a really amazing set of pro bono private sector partners for design, product management, software development, for voter registration. And we have, I think we estimate that this is over $2 million worth of pro bono work. Method is one of the top design firms in the country. Pivotal Labs is one of the top software development firms in the country. And for full disclosure, App Orchard and Tipping Point Partners are companies that I founded and I run as CEO, and I've contributed my staff on a pro bono basis as well. We've enlisted the help of TechServe, which is widely known as the top New York City provider for reseller for Apple, as the deployment partner to enable all these functionalities for candidates and for others who might look to take advantage of it. And we've also enlisted hosting. For marketing, we have one of the top mobile media marketing companies, like Crossing, and we are engaging right now in a process to do all this outreach. So what we have right now is built a tool that makes contributions easy. Contributions are one of the key cornerstones for campaign finance. Sorry. One of the cornerstones for campaign finance in New York City, and with the 6-to-1 matching program, it gives small donors a powerful voice in moving interests away from special interests and corporations. And we've made it easy for candidates, contributors, and for the Campaign Finance Board staff to receive and solicit those contributions and comply with the rules, while providing a communications vehicle for those small donors to be able to communicate directly with their contributors. In the next 60 days, we are building a system that will make the voter feel like a valued member of democracy, spanning the process from where to vote and discovery of who's on the ballot to finding out who won. That will be able to offer the ability to register to vote using a technology, Turbo Vote, that is right now being used in 49 out of 50 states. And also looking for having a very active conversation with the New York State system to voter registration system about how we might more efficiently interface. In our system, like Esther's, you'll be able to get information about candidates, search for candidates, read their profiles and their positions, political affiliations and backgrounds, all pulled from the Campaign Finance Board's database. A voter can make contributions from the city, from anywhere they are. It also allows folks who are supporting a candidate to be able to solicit contributions. You can receive voting day information, and this will be set up through a variety of alerts, set up preferences, communications preferences, and we'll be able to provide a platform for being able to offer people rides and other integrations. And then our objective is to finish this by the Independence Day, that we intend to reach 80% of New Yorkers through marketing and PR, which we have lined up. We are on a path toward receiving non-governmental funding. And we are working closely with the New York City Board of Elections to discuss polling place improvements to make this a seamless experience from voter discovery all the way through the process of voting. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we're all in this business to bring our citizens and make them feel like valued members of our democracy, and I think that's a key component. So as I turn to our election officials on our panel, really thinking about how to merge this citizen activism and this government interest in getting and keeping people engaged in our system. So first I'll go to Dean Logan, who is the LA County Clerk and Registrar. Been there since 2008 and is a nationally recognized expert in elections and has over 20 years experience. In LA, I think you have over almost 4.5 million voters on your registration rolls and have recently implemented online registration, one of the technologies we want to hear about today. So, to you.
Well, good afternoon, and first, as everybody else has done, I just want to take the opportunity to thank Common Cause and the university for holding this forum and for putting me on after lunch, since now I'm about to wake up, so I'm starting to feel the blood rushing in a little bit, and things are going well. So I think it's great the way you started this panel, Jenny, because I think that it sort of tells the story of the kind of things that we heard the two previous speakers talk about. I think tell the story of why it's so important that those of us who work as election administrators are paying attention to the way in which the voters we serve are getting their information and the way in which they're conducting their other activities. And it's incumbent upon us to be sure that we're following suit with the elections process, but we're doing that in a way that is secure and transparent, and that meets both the needs for the integrity of the process, but also the accessibility of the process. So it's great to see that, and I think it's a great lead into just one example, which is online registration. So let me just first, for background purposes, and you already presented some of this, but I usually do this when I do a presentation because it's sort of group therapy for me because I try not to look at these statistics on a regular basis because they frighten me, but I also do it for my colleagues in elections because it makes them feel better about their jurisdiction. So LA County is the largest population and the largest elections jurisdiction in the United States. I didn't know that was click. Okay, thank you. We cover a little over 4,000 square miles, so we're a large jurisdiction. Interestingly enough, and people don't think of LA this way, but to go to Maggie's point earlier today, we are actually a rural and an urban county. There are a lot of rural areas in LA County, which causes some very interesting dynamics for serving both a very highly populated urban area as well as the urban areas. There are 88 cities in LA County, with over 500 political subdivisions that hold various types of elections. In a statewide election, we have just under 5,000 precincts and just over 4,600 polling places that we operate on Election Day. And we do that through the great assistance of about 25,000 poll workers on Election Day. So that's just to give you a little bit of perspective. Visually, this is LA County. We have 4.8 million registered voters. That's a larger electorate in our county than 42 of the 50 states in the country. So of those, that breaks down, we have about 1.3 million of those voters who are on permanent vote-by-mail status. So while as a percentage of our full body of registered voters, we're actually statistically lower than most of the rest of the state of California, yet we do issue more vote-by-mail ballots than any jurisdiction in the country. And in the November 2012 election, we had just over 3.2 million ballots cast in LA County. We're also recognized as one of the most cultural and ethnically diverse communities in the country, probably second only or tied with the one in which we're sitting in now. We have, under the Federal Voting Rights Act, we are required to provide our election materials in 9 languages in addition to English. So right now we have 9 written languages, and then we add to that another 3 to 5 languages that we target for bilingual poll worker assistance at the polling places on Election Day. So I share that just to give you the background of the layers of complexity and needs of our particular jurisdiction. So let's talk a little bit about voter registration and specifically about online voter registration. And at lunch I was talking to some folks and we were talking about what is a reasonable time frame and a reasonable amount of change to implement at any given time in this crazy world of elections. And normally I am a voice of caution in that. I'm big on change, I'm big on progress, but I think it has to be incremental, it has to be well planned out, well practiced, and put in place in a very strategic manner. So I say all that to tell you that with regard to online registration in California, that is not how we did online voter registration. In fact, it was because of the types of programs that you've heard earlier today and even on this panel that many of us in California felt like we were lagging behind the rest of the country, that we had a huge number of eligible, non-registered citizens in the state and in our county that were not getting registered. We weren't reaching them. We had, as you heard earlier, we still do not have a fully HAVA-compliant statewide voter registration database. That's being built and now is scheduled for, I think, around 2016. So we partnered with many of us at the local level and many people in the activist community and the voting rights community partnered and came together and built a coalition to lobby to move California towards online voter registration. And we really pushed for that to be adopted prior to the presidential election cycle. And we were successful in doing that. We had 2 state agencies, rightfully so, who were nervous about the time frame of doing that, nervous about the scope of that project in a state the size of California. But this was one of those cases where our collaboration felt strongly enough that we could not go through another presidential election cycle without providing this service to our voters. And I will tell you that I think all of us who were involved in that are satisfied that that was the right thing to do. It was definitely a case of if you build it, they will come. We implemented this in record time. We actually took it live in the state of California in September, mid-September, before the November general election. From a publicity standpoint, it was a relatively low-key rollout, and without much publication at all, people just swarmed to it. It was amazing. And so, just to give you statistics on that, just between September 19th and October 21st, which was the cutoff for voter registration for the election, over 1.2 million people registered to vote or did a voter registration transaction on the online system, and that was over half of all of the voter registration transactions in the state of California during that same period. In Los Angeles County, in that time period, we had 120,000 applications submitted, and on the final day of registration before the election, on one single day through the online system, over 88,000 registration transactions that took place. So it was phenomenal. And the thing that I think that often doesn't get pointed out with regard to online voter registration is the vast majority of those transactions were updates or changes to existing voter registrations, which represents people who, when they went to vote, would have likely have confronted voting a provisional ballot or being turned away from a polling place because they just hadn't made that change. So it's not just about new registered voters, but it's also about keeping the rolls current and up to date. The other phenomenal thing, and I'm going to run out of time, but I think it's really important to point out, is that the demographics of who used that system and the impact that it had on voter turnout was very significant in California too. Over in LA County, we used kind of 2 different age brackets, so I have to break this down a little bit. In LA County, close to half of all of the online transactions were people between the ages of 18 and 29 years old, and then that statistic went up when you looked at actual new registrations versus updates. So in our county alone, 64% of the new registrations, the brand new registrations, were in the age bracket of 18 to 29-year-olds. Statewide, they looked at 25 and under. 30% of the transactions statewide, again, in that short period of time that the system was live, were people under the age of 25. And that translated to an 8% bump in turnout of those people in that age bracket, 8% higher turnout of those who actually use the online system to register or update their registration versus the same age bracket in the rest of the electorate who used the paper-based registration form. So it clearly had a significant impact. Just to, I'm not good at doing 2 different systems here. So also to give you an idea just of the effect on turnout, this shows a graphic of LA County. On the one side, you can see the paper-based registration, the number of registered voters, and the turnout. 72% of those who used the paper registration system actually showed up to vote in the election. On the online, it was 81% of the people who used the system who actually participated in the election. So it clearly had an impact on turnout. And again, this was after a relatively slow and low-key rollout of the system. So I guess what I would emphasize in this is that the best practices in voter registration in general and in moving forward are shared services and partnerships. This would not have happened, and I specifically want to recognize there were many partners in this, but Common Cause was significant in this process. They got the sponsor for the bill. They refused to take no as an answer early on in the process and worked very closely with many others. Rock the Vote, League of Women Voters, all key players in that process. And I think that that's another important part of progress in the elections process. And Jenny mentioned that in her introduction, that this can't be done in isolation. It needs to be done in collaboration with people in the community. That's the beauty of the technology that you saw here today, is that voters are going to respond to information from when they see it where they're already at. So instead of just posting it on a government website and saying we hope they'll show up and see it, we need to put the information out there so that so we reach people where they're at. And we did that in LA County by partnering not just with the community organizations, but we made a modest investment in a PR campaign, a very modest investment that we then leveraged with media campaigns, radio stations, television stations, billboard companies to take our message, our logo, or our widget, which became familiar with really the simple message of driving to our website and driving to the applications on our website, but also enabling them to put the actual applications on their websites and make it available too. And those were things like the ability to go online and verify your registration, locate your polling place, track your vote by mail ballot so you know that it's on its way to you, or if you've already voted it and returned it, you can actually track to see that we received it and we processed that ballot. All of those things. We also implemented in 2012 an electronic sample ballot. We are one of the states that provides by law a sample ballot in the mail to every registered voter. We've now enabled voters to voluntarily opt into receiving that as an electronic sample ballot, and we're building that to be a truly dynamic sample ballot. It's not just a PDF of the paper version. It's actually an interactive sample ballot that they can begin using, and I really think those are the things that will ultimately make the difference and link to the kind of stuff that that you all are doing.
Thanks, Dean. That's a really exciting report of a very fast implementation and what kind of impact online registration programs can have. So as that sinks in, I want to turn over to Ross Goldstein, who we've heard from earlier, Deputy State Administrator for the Maryland State Board of Elections, who also had a recent implementation of online voter registration. So we're excited to hear about your experience, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank
Ross.
you. Similar to Dean, we also implemented in 2012, and on a similarly quick timeline. Our big motivation was to partner with ERIC and to get involved with the ERIC program, since that was one of the preconditions of ERIC, was to do the voter registration. That was a big motivating factor for us. In addition, we were able to receive some grant funds from the FVAP, had a grant project, and since this was partly also to serve overseas voters, we were able to justify using their grant to help build the system. And as part of that, we made the commitment to them in our grant application that any other jurisdiction that wants to use our system or our code, that we would make that available without charge. So if there are any jurisdictions here that are interested in that, certainly talk to us about them. We're happy to share that with you. It was pretty heavily utilized. We kind of went with a very soft, quiet rollout for the first few months that we had it, just to see how it was operating, then did a little bit more public outreach, not to the extent that that Dean described, but we were able to have, and I should also say that we're one of the 42 states that have less of a population than Los Angeles. So these numbers might pale in comparison, but we did have 105,000 transactions processed in 2012 using the system, and again, it didn't get started until mid-year, so it was pretty heavily utilized. And we can also, the system can be used to apply to register to vote or to update an existing voter registration. For domestic civilian voters, they're required to provide their driver's license or Maryland ID card in order to use the system, and then they have to consent to use the electronic copy of their signature that's on file with the Motor Vehicle Administration as their signature for their voter registration transaction. And for military and overseas voters, if they don't have a Maryland driver's license or ID card, then they're required to use their Social Security number, and again, they have to consent to use that Social Security number as their signature for the application being submitted. With the MVA information, we're able to verify that immediately as part of the online transaction. If it doesn't verify, they can't go forward, but they can have a pre-populated application will be available to them so they can complete the process on paper and mail it in. But the verification is required to complete the process for the domestic civilian voters. The security of the system, and there was a question about that earlier, we did have a security issue with our system. Again, a lot of the basis of it was that the driver's license number would be used to authenticate that the application being submitted was really being submitted from me, as opposed to somebody impersonating me or something like that. The problem was that our driver's license number is a publicly available Soundex number that you can go onto websites that are available out there, put in my last name, my date of birth, and it will calculate accurately, I forget to what percentage, but for most people will accurately calculate the driver's license number. And so this was a flaw. I don't think that this was a technological flaw. I think it could be exploited because of the fact that it's online. The computer scientists theorized that you could create an automated program to work online, calculate all the Soundex numbers, and wreak havoc on the voter registration system. I think it would be hard to do that just because there's still a paper process at the end. We still are required under the National Voter Registration Act to send out confirmation notices. I think if massive fraudulent changes were being made to the database, that people would be notified of that fact and it would come to light pretty quickly. But nonetheless, it was a vulnerability that got a lot of attention and a lot of criticism. And I think partly, correctly so. It was something that was overlooked. So to remedy that, we are now going to start to require, in addition to the driver's license number, the issuance date on the driver's license, which isn't a calculatable field, and also the last 4 digits of the Social Security number, all of which can be verified immediately during the online transaction. So it would address this concern, I think, pretty fully. Regarding the IT security issues, we did build the system with IT, with security consultants working with us throughout the process, and then when we were done, we hired another consultant to do penetration testing, basically attempt to hack into the system, and we were able to find that the system was secure from an IT perspective, but there was, as I said, that one other issue. As far as the benefits of it, I think, again, in addition to serving the public efficiently and conveniently, I think for our election officials, it's a great time saver for them. The information comes into the system. All they have to do is review it. There's no data entry. They just verify the information, do a quick review, and are able to have that voter processed. So everything's pre-populated. And we're going to utilize this system moving forward. This past legislative session, we're allowing voters to also apply for their absentee ballots online. And so we're going to use this same system to do that process as well. So we'll continue to build on what we have. So that's all that I have about online voter registration. So.
Thank you so much. I'll be interested, maybe I'll start with a first question. I mean, one of the themes I think that came out was really building these engagement techniques and the impact it has on our younger voters, people who are new to the electorate, and how to get them, and we talked about this earlier, having a habit-forming type of process to get people engaged at a young age and keep them engaged. So I'd be interested to hear from the panelists how this technology intersects with the youth engagement piece specifically.
Well, I'll take a stab at that. I mean, I think that's something that typically we in government are behind on trying to do that, but I think we've tried to engage a couple of tools that way, and there are some that are still under development. We had the great opportunity to partner with Rock the Vote, so we had a lot of events where we actually, again, really capitalized on the theme of reaching people where they're at. So we actually went to actually appeared with a couple of rappers, which was an interesting experience. But it was, here's a tip if you're going to try and do this engagement, because they gave me the opportunity to introduce the rappers, and the audience wasn't really interested in my introduction, so I won't be doing that again. But again, so again, things like it can be simple things like the reminders leading up to election date and information about how to get that. Again, making that visible on websites for radio stations and other places where that demographic goes, rather than having them come to you. So we did PSAs where instead of me as a government official being the voice and the face for that, it was the disc jockey that they're used to hearing in the morning and on their drive. And I think that had an impact. It's hard to quantify that. The great thing about things like the e-sample ballot subscription is once they've subscribed, you have the ability to send out flights, pre-election flights. So for instance, we knew how many of the people who subscribed to the electronic sample ballot, we knew if they had opened it. So the week before the election, if they hadn't opened it yet, we could send out another reminder and say, here's the link, it's still here. You're going to need this information to know where to go to vote, those kind of things. I think that there's much more advanced use of social media and applications that I think we've just begun to dip our toes in it. But I think what I've found, at least what our experience has been, is you need to dip your toe into it and not be afraid of it, and you need to do it. Social media has been a great tool for a jurisdiction with 4.8 million registered voters. I personally, on Election Day, interact with voters on Twitter, and it's a very powerful process, because generally it starts out with somebody posting a very cynical or derogatory tweet because they're upset because they don't know where to go to vote, and so they'll say something like, well, yeah, great that everybody's reminding me to vote, but the registrar can't even bother to let me know where to vote. But it enables you, if you respond to that and you're able to get them their information, the power that has, because it gets repeated so often, and they're so surprised that you've responded and that you're interacting with them, that it really ends up having a very positive effect. So I think there's kind of endless possibilities, but it's something you just have to kind of start doing and exploring.
I can comment on this briefly. We had our site out for a year, and we started this outreach public information campaign. One of them we did with the Palabolas dance group, and that was really designed to sort of hit people and make sure and use that to get them to move the traffic to the website, which it partially did. But you need a combination of both the online approach as well as what everybody likes to call now the low touch. You need the community organizations, particularly if you want to connect to the new immigrant populations or to the low-income voting populations who tend not to pay attention to elections. So you need a large group of organizations you want to partner with. With the youth, in an interesting way, this is the low-hanging fruit because they do use social media, and what we found from the social media use of our website is that there was a chain reaction that happened. Once you get somebody in a network on, they send it to their friends, and the research shows, of course, that is actually the best way to get people out to vote, not just to register, that if you hear it from your friend through that network. And so the social media was very important to the hits on our site. We also used that creating the icons, sharing with our partners, asking them to share with their partners to just put it up on their websites, 2 weeks before elections, in that period where people are beginning to really pay attention. And so we got a lot of hits to our website where people could get the information and even registration information. So that was, I think, very helpful. But I would really emphasize that you need to develop a concerted plan. It just can't be ad hoc and hope that people just pass it on. The PSAs are helpful, but in some places they're too expensive. So, you have to weigh the costs and benefits of each type of public outreach that you engage in. The one thing that we have in New York, which is exciting, and we're working with them right now, the Department of Youth and Community Development actually has a legal mandate to do civic engagement for the youth population. So we're starting to work with them through the settlement houses and the community organizations to get the information out there. There's no question that through the technology, you reach so many more people than you do through the events and things of that sort, the face-to-face events. But you need both. You need to kickstart the technology process, and some of it, you will not reach those hard-to-reach communities if you just rely on Twitter and Facebook and the new technologies. They may end up there eventually, but they're not starting there. So that's sort of some of what we found.
Yeah, so I think the audiences are very, are very varied. I mean, there's still a huge number of folks who still, still read a physical newspaper and watch TV as a way to get information. And so you can't get rid of that. There's not going to be a sudden shift to social and mobile overnight. But one of the things I think is very interesting in looking at the transition from kind of traditional media to where we are today and going into the future is that kind of there's a mistake that a lot of folks make in saying that technology is going to replace a lot of things that are actually part of human nature. And in my office, we like to say that the Facebook like button is actually the most powerful social innovation in technology, because it's brought innovation, it's brought emotion to a technological interchange. That someone can say something and someone says, you like it. For those of you on Facebook, when you get that message saying somebody liked your message, doesn't make you feel all warm, gooey inside. And so it's just, but it's the beginning, or when somebody favorites your tweet, but it's the beginning of that emotional connection where people feel like their voice is heard and that they make the transition to action. That civic engagement goes beyond the election day, that it actually goes into the day-to-day activities of following what's happening in your civic society and then actually stepping up and doing something about that. And when we get to that point, and when we get to the point of having these conversations that Dean is talking about, you get to the point where people start to think that government is actually responding to them and talking to them. And that's really what's at the heart of democracy.
Those are really good and important points. Let's open it up for questions. I think we've got time for about 2 questions or so before we have to take our next break.
I'm wondering if you have any experience with whether or not these technological improvements or other innovations affect participation in the down ballot races. There's been a lot of talk about turnout in presidential election years and registration, but I know certainly in New York that the down ballot races are way, way low priority for people. And what, in terms of technology, is out there that might get people more motivated to participate in those down ballot races?
Just one quick response from what we were doing. Part of what motivated us to create this website was the down ballot races, frankly. There's lots of information on presidential races and gubernatorial races, but we have these judicial elections here which no one has a clue about. So what we did with this personalized ballot is people can link then at least to the judicial candidates' websites, as well as to the Bar Association's ratings on these judges. So 2 pieces of information quickly accessible to people within a link with one quick, keystroke or whatever, and people have more information. And we think from the research the key to the down ballot races is really making it easy for people to get this information in a coherent way, that their ballot, they need to see who's on their ballot before they go and have that opportunity quickly to find information out. Otherwise, they're going to continue to sort of pass on those races or just, vote in a way that either reflects party or gender, which is what I know my students do all the time.
Any other comments on that question?
Yeah, just a couple things on that real quick. First, I think it's a tough question, and I think it's one that we all grapple with, and we'll see that tomorrow in the LA City Mayor's election, where turnout is expected to be relatively low. I would note that I don't run that election. The city clerk's office runs that election, but otherwise I wouldn't be here today. But I think that it is a tough situation. I don't think there's any statistical information. I don't think we've been doing this enough to know whether or not it's having an impact. I think there's some anecdotal things that I think that are kind of fun to look at. So, for instance, less so on a crowded ballot, the down races, where I think it has had, at least I hope it's had an impact, is we have unscheduled elections that occur for vacancies or something of that nature, and it's helped to raise the profile of those elections when it's at a time when voters are not expecting an election to be going on. I think it has had an impact there. I think the other kind of point to look at in the future, and this could be a difficult pill to swallow, I think, for some of the lawmakers, because it would take law changes. But from a usability standpoint, there's really a lot of opportunity in terms of ballot design and the interface that the voter has with their ballot, depending on what technology you're using, to allow them, if they're getting a customizable sample ballot or an application, like Esther was talking about, to be able to choose what order they want to look at things. I mean, if they come in with, exactly. I mean, but I think if you focus group that and survey voters, I think it has some interest. So, we probably will never be able to customize the order of offices on the ballot, but what we can do is present it where they actually can see on their first view that there are national, state, local measures and contests, as opposed to not even seeing that until you get to the second or third page of the ballot. So I think it's really a usability issue. And I said usability so that Pam would tweet that, so that my friend Dana would favorite it, and I would get that gooey feeling inside. So I hope that you get that.
I actually think we are out of time, so I'm sorry we're not going to be able to get to more questions, but I want to thank our panelists and leave you all with that warm, gooey feeling inside. So thanks very much. So I think we've got a 10-minute break. Is that right, Susan, before we come